Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Senior Living Smart Partner webinar. Today, we'd like to welcome Lynn and Mark Ackerman from SinSite Surveys. Lynn is the Chief Delights Officer at SinSite Surveys, and she has a PhD in experimental psychology from the University of Wisconsin and is 13 years of experience conducting market research and providing business improvement consulting to senior living companies. Mark is the Chief Technology Officer at SinSite Surveys and has his Master's in Clinical Psychology and a Bachelor's in Computer Science from the University of Northern Iowa. He also has 13 years of experience conducting market research and creating data visualization solutions for senior living clients. Please feel free to send your questions or comments, and feel free to tweet questions or comments at GetSLSmart or use the hashtag SmartWebinar. Let me turn the webinar over to Lynn and Mark, who will delight and retain your residents and staff with surveys done right. Lynn and Mark, I will hand the webinar over to you now.
Thanks for that nice introduction, Renee. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're located. I want to thank Debbie and Andrea for inviting us to present this webinar today. And I also want to personally thank each attendee for taking time out of your busy day to join us. Our goal for you today is to walk away with one or two fresh ideas for how to find opportunities in your survey data and how to act on those opportunities to delight and retain your residents and staff members. Just a little bit more about us. My journey into senior living began back in 2001 when I worked as Senior Market Research Analyst for Altera Healthcare. And as some of you may know, Altera was acquired by Brookdale Senior Living back in 2005. My role as SinSite's Chief Delight Officer is not only to delight our customers, but to teach our customers how to delight and retain their customers and their staff members based on their survey findings. Mark and I are very hands-on, so if you happen to call SinSite, I'll be the person who answers the phone, as I am the main point of contact for all projects. Sitting next to me is Mark Ackerman.
Hello.
Mark got his start in senior living coincidentally also back in 2001. He worked for a small senior health care consulting firm with the goal of helping nursing homes provide the best care and service possible to their residents. He continues to perform that role for SinSite as our Chief Technology Officer, and what he enjoys most is helping our clients see the story behind their survey findings and helping them visualize their data. So I'm going to be the primary speaker today, and Mark will chime in occasionally when he has something to add. So let's start with this question. Do you know how your customers and employees feel? In other words, do you have a good gauge on how your customers and employees feel about living and working in your community, or how family members feel about the care and service their loved one is receiving? I know many of you have those one or two vocal residents or family members who are not shy about letting you know how they feel and chiming in when they have a concern. And you do what you can to serve those residents and those family members, but they may not represent the majority of your customers and your staff members, if you have vocal staff members as well. And they don't represent necessarily the collective views of everybody in your community, and that's where surveys come in. So for today's webinar, we have three goals. We want to first talk to you about the truth about customer and employee satisfaction by providing you some statistics. We want to talk about what surveys can help you discover by providing you with different ways of identifying opportunities in your survey data. And we also want to show you our method for how to act on your survey results to create positive change in your community. I'd like to start with a little story. When I was working at Altera back in 2001, one of my jobs was to fly around the country and hold discussion groups with residents, family members, and team members. And one of those trips took me to a community in Edmond, Oklahoma. And as we were getting ready to start this discussion group, residents were convening in the next room for a music event. The first song began, and I suddenly heard someone yell out, "Yee-haw!" And it startled the heck out of me. I practically jumped out of my shoes. This gentleman was sitting there on the couch dressed to the nines in his cowboy hat, his bolo tie, his cowboy boots, and was just slapping his leg and hooting and hollering to the music. And I couldn't help but smile from ear to ear, and I thought to myself, boy, is this gentleman having a good time. Well, not all of our customers are that transparent, so we have to find other ways of finding out how they're feeling. Let me provide you with some unbelievable statistics about customer satisfaction. For every customer complaint, there are 23 other unhappy customers who have remained silent. Some of these 26 unhappy customers will leave due to dissatisfaction and will not even tell you why. Why does this happen? Well, some folks don't want to be confrontational, some are afraid of hurting feelings or getting someone in trouble, and in some cases it's easier to just wipe the slate clean and start over with a new company. I know I've done that myself when I've had it with poor service from a company. It takes 12 positive experiences to make up for one unresolved negative experience. Think about the implications behind that and the amount of work that's required, especially if a few of your employees are not fully on board with your customer service program and continuously provide negative experiences for your residents and your family members. And in some cases, sales are lost because that first negative experience happens over the phone when a prospect calls and they decide to go somewhere else. It costs 6 to 7 times more to acquire a new customer than to retain an existing one. That's a huge difference. Some of the factors that contribute to the extra costs are marketing materials, advertising, basically your salesperson's salary and their budget. Some less obvious costs might be new customers coming in at a lower base rate, or the planning and execution required to move in a new resident.
Or the cost of a vacant room.
The cost of a vacant room. And so the main point here is that it's just more economical to retain our customers and our team members rather than trying to acquire new ones. As a matter of fact, there's another statistic out there by HR firm Merit that says the cost of replacing an employee is approximately 2 to 3 times their monthly salary. So what do our employees want? Well, there are a number of things they want from their work experience, and the items that you see here tap into a term I'm sure you've heard before, which is employee engagement. And these are some of the things we measure on our employee experience survey. So employees want achievement, which requires having clear expectations and goals that they could meet. They want mastery. They want to master their work, which requires a leader who provides effective coaching and feedback for them. They want a sense of autonomy, which means feeling like they can work independently and that they could be trusted to make choices about how their work is done. They want a sense of purpose, which means feeling connected to the company mission and feeling that they're working for a higher purpose. They want connection, which means having a leader who cares and team members that they get along with and work together well as a team. And more than anything, they want appreciation. They want to be recognized for their hard work and for stepping out of their normal role to go above and beyond for customers. Okay, so it's time for our first poll. Our question to you is, how does your senior community or your senior living organization typically conduct surveys? And the answer choices are, we partner with a survey company, we administer our own surveys in-house, or we do not conduct surveys.
The results came out. We partner with the survey company 0%. We administer our own surveys in-house 100%. We do not conduct surveys 0%. So 100% administer their own surveys in-house.
Okay, great. Well, we're so happy to hear you're conducting surveys. What we hope for you today is that you're able to walk away with a few new ideas for how to identify opportunities in your survey data and how to act on those opportunities to make positive change in your communities. Okay, so the process starts with a survey. We have a customer experience survey and an employee experience survey that we offer. And in our example that we're going to go through today with you, we created a fictitious senior living company called Swank Home Assisted Living. So our customer experience survey starts by asking residents and family members to provide some overall ratings about their community. And then we ask questions about community management, staff members, dining experience, activities, resident care, the physical environment of the community, and supportive services like the front desk, transportation, security. On our employee experience survey, after overall ratings, the employees asked to rate how they feel connected to their company mission, the preparation for the job, their job design, their enjoyment of the work they do, their leadership, how they get along with their coworkers, and the customer service that is provided in their community. We just have communities work on our lowest scores. So when we're speaking with new clients or prospective clients, we ask them, well, what do you do when you get your survey results? How do you act on them to make positive change? And the most common answer we get is, we just have communities work on their lowest scores. Or if it's a single community, they would say, well, we work on our lowest scores. And that makes sense, because your lowest scores are areas that you naturally want to raise. And although it's a great way to look at your data, it's not the only way. So in addition to talking about low scores that are achieved on the survey, we want to cover a total of 4 different ways that you can look at your data. And those 4 opportunities for finding improvement areas in your data are looking at your lowest scoring areas, looking at items that score below benchmarks, looking at items on your survey that promise to have the most impact if made the focus of improvement efforts, and also looking at the comments that your residents and your team members make right on the survey. So as you're going through your survey results, you probably would like to have a piece of paper in front of you so you can make a list of potential opportunities to improve in your community. So let's go through these 4 ways. Lowest performing areas. So one way to quickly identify your low performing areas, if you're doing this in-house, would be to calculate scores for every survey item and simply sort them from high to low. So all of your high scoring areas are together at the top and all of your low scoring areas are together at the bottom. It not only allows you to quickly see what your strengths are at the top of the list, but also which areas are performing below average that you may like to improve. When we present reports to our clients, we like to take them down a path of investigation, which means first we share broad areas or domains of satisfaction with them, which are basically a roll-up of individual survey items grouped together. And then they drill down from there by looking at the individual survey items that tie into those domains. And then you could even break your results down further by looking at individual resident and team member segments or demographic groups that show you how different groups in your community are answering the individual items. So here's an example from our report. At the top left chart, we're showing you scores that were achieved in domains of satisfaction or broad areas of satisfaction. And some of these may directly relate to departments in your community. So in this particular example, the highest scores were achieved for staff members and activities at 88%, which is good. And at the bottom of the domain chart, you see dining and management achieved the lowest domain scores. So dining achieved a score of 64%, and so we naturally want to look into that a little bit more to see what's going on in dining and what might be drawing that score down. So if you look at the middle chart, there are 3 items related to dining. Dining room servers are attentive to my needs actually received a fairly high score of 84%. But the other 2 items, the meals look appetizing and taste good, scored 57%, and the menu has a nice variety of selections, scored 51%. So those are obviously scores that are not very high. About half of your residents or family members agree that these items on your survey are doing well, and you might want to list them both on your list of potential opportunities to improve. But let's dig a little deeper. Let's look at specifically how respondents answered each of these questions. So in the bottom chart called item frequencies, you see for those 2 items related to the meals and the menu that there are 5 separate colors. Green represents the percent who said strongly agree, and red represents the percent who said strongly disagree, and then everything in between. So if we look at the meals look appetizing and taste good, and also menu has a nice variety of selections, about 15 to 20% strongly agree with these particular statements. And if you look particularly at menu selection, the percentages in orange and red on the right-hand side add up to 16%, which means 16% actually disagree or strongly disagree that the menu has a nice variety of selections. So I would put both of those on my list of potentials, but if you had to pick just one area of these two, I would go with menu variety, because there's a larger group of customers who disagree that menu variety is good. Let's look at another example. So management, which is the second lowest domain on the chart, scored 70% overall. And again, you can see in the middle chart that there are 4 survey questions contributing to the score of 70%. And the first 2 are community management responds to my questions and concerns, and community management cares about me. Those achieved scores of 75 and 74%, which isn't great, but when you look at the other 2 items that are scoring in the 60s, you may say, okay, if I want to do anything here related to community management, let me focus on these scores that are in the 60s. So community management resolves questions about my monthly bill is 66%, and community management keeps me updated scored 64%. So let's again dig a little deeper. Let's look in the bottom chart at those last 2 questions boxed in red. Community management resolves questions about my monthly bill. 22% of your residents or family members strongly agree with that statement. And 36% strongly agree in the green bar that community management keeps me updated. So again, if I had to pick just one of these, I would pick billing resolution as an area of focus, because there's a lower percentage of residents who are satisfied in that area. So the other thing you could do is break out your scores by demographic group. So let's say we're looking at the menu variety example again. So in this particular case, and we saw in the item frequencies earlier that responses varied from strongly agree to strongly disagree. If you roll those up into satisfaction scores, it shows here that by length of stay, residents who have been with the community between 1 and 3 years are less satisfied with menu variety than other lengths of stay. And if you look at the chart on the bottom left, it's showing that when, in terms of age, residents under 70 and 90 and up have lower satisfaction scores on menu variety compared to other age groups. And for gender, it looks like there isn't much difference between males and females in terms of their view of menu variety. So you might ask yourself, you know, what's going on here, and how could I dig deeper to find out why these groups are less satisfied, and what might be done to fix the problem for them?
Right, and when you're looking at this, you might say people start off fairly satisfied, but it seems after about a year the satisfaction is going down. What could be causing that? Why are they, say, less satisfied with the menu variety at this point? And it could be for the first year, having chicken every Monday was fine, but you know, after a year, they're kind of tired of the same old routine. And then you might also be wondering, why does it pick up after the third year? It could be people get used to the routine. That's just the way it is around here. Perhaps a few people are really foodies, you know, left because, you know, they're tired of Chicken Mondays. I don't know, but you know, those are things you could start thinking about to try and get a better idea of what's going on. And also looking at the age, it looks like the people who are less than 70 and over 90 aren't as satisfied. And it could be that people who are less than 70 just have higher expectations for what the dining could be. And the people who are 90 plus could be on special diets, and you know, maybe the food isn't as good on their special diet. And while we're looking at just customer satisfaction here, I think it's also important to know that we could look at team members here too. And a really useful demographic for team members is to break down by what their primary role is. And you may find, for example, that your CNAs are not as happy as your nurses, and you may want to take steps to raise their level of satisfaction so that everyone within the community has a similar level of satisfaction.
The second way to find opportunities in your data is to compare yourself to some benchmarks. And we've identified 3 ways of doing that. First of all, you could compare your scores to the same scores you achieved in the prior period. This is actually our favorite way of benchmarking for a client. And you're basically trending your scores over time, seeing if you improved or went down in different areas. The reason we like this one so much is because you're always focusing internally on continuous improvement, and you're really taking what your residents, your family members, and your team members are saying and what their individual needs are, and always trying to make improvements in those areas. But another way, and so if you look in the chart that we're showing here on the slide, this is trending within different regions of a large senior living company, and you want to see green because green means that scores improved from the prior period. And you can see here that New York actually had a little bit of a decline. So you'd want to, if you're working as senior management at a larger company, you might want to look into New York. Is it a single community that maybe didn't perform as well as usual, or maybe it's a regional-wide thing that made that score go down a little bit? When you compare yourself to the company, you may find there are areas that are performing above or below average, which might not be your lowest scoring areas, but from a company perspective, you want to have a consistent brand for customers. So you may say, I'm going to work on this area because I want to get up to the company expectation for how I should be performing, because if someone goes to Community 1 for that company, they should get the same experience that they get when they go to Community 2. So the purpose of comparing yourself to the company overall is to make sure you're on par with your sister communities and how they're performing. And then a third way is to compare yourself to the industry. It's very interesting to know how you're performing compared to an industry average. We have a database if that was something you wanted to do. The only caution we have about using industry benchmarks is that, it's much more meaningful to look at your local competition and to make sure you're doing something to stand out compared to the other communities around you in your local area. And we have found that to be much more meaningful for clients than just making sure they're doing as well as the average of the entire country. A third way we provide results that allow you to find opportunities is this chart here. We call it our priority improvement chart. And what it's basically doing is plotting your satisfaction scores against importance scores. So each circle on the chart is a survey item. And the items that appear in the upper left quadrant in the red shaded area are items that are not only scoring lower relative to other areas on your survey, they've also been deemed as more important compared to other areas on your survey, according to how strongly they relate to overall satisfaction. So if you decided to focus on these items in the upper left quadrant, you're not only addressing low scoring areas, but you're picking items that promise to have the greatest impact on customer and employee satisfaction. So if you look at this item in the upper left-hand corner, which just stands out, it's question 9, and in the key below, question 9 is, I'm given opportunities to build friendships with other residents. So that would be a prime candidate for putting on your potential list of opportunities, because it's not only low compared to other areas on the survey, it also is more important and promises to have the greatest impact if made the focus of improvement efforts. Another item here is item 12, which is right here, and that one is the wellness team provides quality service. On this particular chart, low scoring areas also tend to be more important, as indicated in that upper left quadrant, but that's not always the case. You could have a score that's very moderate, but also the most important. So let's say this question 11 is way up here, then that is one you might want to consider, even though it's not a lowest scoring area, because it's high in importance. And the fourth way that we like to look at our data to find opportunities is by looking at the comments residents and team members write on their survey. So what we do at SenSite Surveys is we will human code every comment into a thematical category. So if someone says on the survey the food is cold, that gets categorized as dining. If someone says I'm always running short on care supplies, that would be a team member, then that would go under equipment and supplies. And by coding every single comment that specifically into a theme, it allows us to do a few things for our clients. First of all, as you can see here in the chart, we can present those themes to you sorted from most to least prevalent. So in this particular case, 27% of residents made some comment about dining when they were asked, what is the one most important thing we can do to improve your community? Given that question, 20% decided to make a positive comment anyways. And we'll talk later about how to take advantage of your strengths. But right now we want to focus on that 27% dining. So by sorting the themes this way, you can quickly see what the buzz is in your community and what most people are thinking about. And of course, what you want to do now is see what exactly are they saying. So in your report, you'll also see specific comments, the verbatim comments. And because we coded everything and sorted them by theme, you are now able to go right to the dining section in your comments and read all of the dining comments. So some of the examples here that folks wrote, better choices of groceries, a good cook, better assortment of food, different vegetables, have coffee, I don't like decaf. So you begin to really get the meat on the bones, and this is so much more fun to look at than just the scores, because it's giving you an idea of why people rated you the way they did and what specifically they're asking for. Not only is it nice to have these ranked by theme so you can find them easily in your report, but if you wanted to disseminate these comments to different department directors in your community or at the corporate office, they're already grouped that way, so it's easy to send them out to various people to look at the comments that relate to them specifically. So these comments really bring your scores to life. And you could look at them to begin to get some ideas for how to make improvements. Okay, it's time for our second poll. And again, if it doesn't come up, Renee, maybe you could come back on and let me know the results. The question is, has your community or organization been involved in a survey process that resulted in noticeable improvement? Which means following a survey, a process was put in place and you were able to individually observe improvement that took place as a result. And your answer options are yes, no, or not sure, or not applicable.
Okay, the results are 57% said yes, and 0% said no, and 43% said not sure or not applicable.
Okay, that's wonderful that over half of you have actually seen noticeable improvement as the result of your survey results. And you know, making change based on your results it's why you do the survey. It's the most important reason for conducting a survey, but it can be the most challenging part of it as well because it requires teamwork, it requires planning and organization, and it requires follow-through. So we're going to talk now about a process we use to help our clients turn their results into improvements. So many folks, when we speak to them and ask them, you know, what is your biggest pain point when it comes to surveys? They'll say, well, I need help turning my survey results into improvements. We have our report and we see what areas need to grow, but we're not exactly sure how to implement that plan. So our 4-step process is going to be shared with you now. The 4 steps we've identified and that we share with our clients for making improvements based on your survey results are, first, select 1 or 2 improvement goals. And the point here is not to select more than that because you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. Second would be to hold feedback sessions, which are, you know, after the survey's done, hold feedback sessions with your residents or your team members if you've done an employee survey. Third, to create a SMART action plan. And fourth, to monitor your progress while your improvement plans are underway. So first is to select 1 or 2 improvement goals. So as you read through your report, you made a list of potential opportunities to improve, and you may have between 5 or 10 items on that list. Well, you don't want to try to work on all of those at once, because if you do, you're just setting yourself up for failure. So the first step in the process is to narrow that to 1 or 2 goals. And the way we recommend that you do that is by meeting with your leadership team in your community and talking about what you found on the survey report, what you've identified as opportunities, and then share with them your ideas and talk as a group to decide, well, which areas should we actually work on? Which seem doable, which seem achievable, and which seem important to us. That might be based not only on your survey, but other things you've heard people say in the community. So you want to get together with your leadership team and make that judgment as to which one or maybe two you want to work on. So for example, if one of the items that came up on the survey that received a low score on your team member survey was pay rate or salary, and you know personally that you don't have a lot of control over that at the community level, you may knock that one off the list for right now and talk to your corporate office about possibilities. But you want to make sure you select something achievable and you narrow the list to just one or two. Most improvement initiatives should be able to succeed in about 3 months. So if you feel like you can't do it in 3 months, then you've probably taken on more than you can handle. The second step is to hold feedback sessions. And by the way, after you talk to your leadership team and picked one or two areas, the folks around the table may immediately have some ideas. You know, it might not be a surprise to them that there are certain areas that came up, and they might have some initial ideas for how to make improvements. So that would be your opportunity to hash out some early ideas for what you need to do. But in some cases, you need to hear from your residents and team members again to get more specific information from them. And the way you do that is with feedback sessions. So for example, you may have decided you want to work on your social calendar because you received a low score on activities and events are interesting to me. And you may even have comments that say things like, I wish you had activities that were more interesting to me, there's too much bingo, things like that. But to identify a specific improvement goal, you may need to get even more specific than that. Do residents want more music events? Do they want more educational lectures? Maybe there's a subgroup of residents who enjoy quilting and that's what they prefer to do. These feedback sessions will give you those details that you need. So you get everyone together in a meeting, and maybe this is a meeting you already have anyways, so to hit them at natural touch points is the easiest way to accomplish that. And you start by celebrating your strengths. You want to share the results of the survey, and you talk about your high scores and you celebrate those. But then you share your improvement plans and which one or two areas you've decided to work on this year. And this is then your opportunity to discuss their specific concerns and ideas. So you could come up with one or two goals that are very specific and measurable as to what you're going to do. So a specific goal might be add one music event and one educational lecture to the activities calendar every month, versus let's add more music and educational lectures to the calendar. You're being very specific and you're defining your goals very carefully. The other point to make is that you haven't heard from everybody on the survey. Some folks decided not to take the survey. Others may have made comments not related to activities. So if activities are your goal, this is your chance to hear from everybody and not just those who made comments. You can't cross the sea merely by standing and staring at the water. I love this quote because it really illustrates the importance of taking action in order to meet your goals. So we're going to talk to you now about how to create a SMART plan of action. So SMART is an acronym, and it means this. S is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So first, you want your goals to be specific. You want them to directly relate to some activity in the community that you can visualize and a goal that you can attain in a very specific way that is also measurable. So based on your feedback sessions with residents, you've identified specific goals, and they don't need to be overarching broad goals. They can be add one music event and one educational lecture to the calendar every month. And by saying one event, you're being measurable, and that's how you're going to know if you've met your goals, because you can easily measure whether or not you've attained it. Of course, you want your plan to be achievable, and that's why you got together with your leadership team and talked about what looked achievable in approximately 3 months or so. So you're focusing on that. And of course, you want the plan to be relevant. That's why you conducted the survey and looked at your report, to make sure you were working on things that were relevant to the folks who will be affected by it. And finally, the plan should be time-bound, which means you should have target completion dates for your overall goal and for individual steps of your plan. So I'm sure some of you are not seeing this for the first time, but this is an illustrated SMART action plan. So the improvement goal is, in this case, provide every family member with a resident update once per month. So no doubt on this survey, a score for community management, keeping residents and family members updated. Maybe wasn't as high as you wanted it to be, so you've decided you're going to work on updating family members more often. So you've set this very specific goal of providing every family member with a resident update once per month. It's specific and it's measurable. So the first component of the plan are your action steps. What will be done? And you can see here there are 5 action steps. We recommend you keep it to no more than 5, so it remains achievable. And the second component is responsible parties, who will actually carry out this plan. And again, an action plan and making improvements requires teamwork. And in this particular case, there are at least 5 different people involved in carrying out the action steps. Needed resources is the third component, like funding and additional materials you might need. And because we really focus our process on achievable, additional resources are usually meager. You know, you might need a little budget money or a few materials, but it usually doesn't play a huge role in the plan. And finally, your date. By when will I have each of these steps completed? So your plan is written and you've implemented it, and now it's underway. And you may ask as a community director, how do I know I'm making a difference? And if you work as a senior manager at the corporate office, or maybe you're the VP of a division or a region or the head of HR, you might say, and we've heard this from folks, we need a way to keep our communities or ourselves accountable for following through on our improvement plans. So it's really important to find a way to monitor yourself along the way, so you're not necessarily waiting for the next survey to come out to find out whether or not your efforts are making a difference. Because by then it's going to be too late to determine whether a change of direction is needed and you may not reach your goal.
Right, and a good example of that is if you have a weight loss plan. Say you want to lose 10 pounds in 2 months. Well, one way to do that would be to just pick a weight loss plan and weigh yourself at the end of 2 months and see how you did. And that might work out for you if you start off with a good plan, and it might not. So it might be a little better to weigh yourself daily or every week, and say you picked, 5 Subway sandwiches a day because you saw some commercials and that sounded like a good idea to you, but the commercials never said how many sandwiches to eat, so you thought 5 was good. But at the end of the week, you weigh yourself and you've gained 3 pounds. So you might want to make some adjustments. Instead of waiting until the end of the 2 months, you could say, oh, maybe I'll cut back into those sandwiches and add in a couple salads. So monitoring how you're doing along the way just gives you some feedback on how your plan's working. It's pretty useful.
Right. So we've identified ways to help communities monitor their improvement efforts, and also how to let the corporate office monitor efforts if they're keeping track of what's going on at multiple communities. So in your individual community, one thing you could do is, if you're working on a process that is very observable, like housekeeping, you could just keep average minutes to clean a room and plot them on a line chart. So maybe for one reason or another, you've decided your goal relates to decreasing the amount of time it takes to clean a room. Okay, so if you chart out every day how long it's taking to do that, and you average your weekly scores, you could plot them on a line chart. And you don't need to be an Excel expert to do this stuff. You could even sketch it out on a piece of paper. So what you see here on the lower left, the left chart, is housekeeping times plotted over 5 weeks. So these are weekly averages, and you can see in this particular example, in week 1 it was taking 18 minutes to clean a room, and by week 5 it was taking 10 minutes. So you're moving toward your goal. Sometimes your efforts are not that easily observable. So for example, if you're trying to improve meal quality, you may decide to throw a quick pulse survey out on the dining tables during dinner to ask residents to complete a quick survey, just 2 or 3 questions, to ask how you're doing. You might do this every 2 weeks or once a month or whatever makes sense to you. So the chart on the right is a bar chart plotting ratings of those few items on your pulse survey over 2 quarters. And you can see in this case, resident perceptions are improving because of the changes that you're making. And again, you have a gauge that the efforts you're engaging in are actually making a difference.
And it also should be noted that this kind of monitoring doesn't apply to every improvement goal. Say your improvement goal is to work on having an employee celebration party every month. well, you don't need to see how you're doing on that. Just put a tick mark that you did each month, and that's enough.
Right, so it varies from goal to goal. Now, how would the corporate office or someone at the regional divisional level keep track of what community's improvement goals are? Well, one of the things we provide to our clients is an online entry form that allows all of the communities to enter their plans online. So we will customize a web page for your company, and you can see this very much emulates the action plan form. So you have the improvement goal at the top, and what we've added here in field number 2 is the ability to indicate the individual survey item you're targeting for improvement. And later, that's going to help us track your goals for you. So it's got the action steps, the responsible parties, etc. So once all communities have entered their plans here, we will export the data to an Excel file and send it to whoever's responsible for having those plans. And that way they have it all together and they could see, they could just review the plans for all of their communities in one place.
Yeah. And this is also something you can do yourself. You don't need to go the effort of setting up something online. If you can do it, it's nice, but you could just have people fill out an Excel form that you had set up and then have them all send it back and you can compile that data. So it's easily something you can do in-house.
Sure. So what we do then when the next survey comes out, so we have 2 reports we provide. We have a community report for directors and department heads, and we have an executive report that goes to the senior management at the corporate office. In the next survey round, we will provide a page in the report that shows every community's goals. So here, community 1, they decided to work on activities. The survey item is they want to make their activities more interesting, which was a survey item they selected from that entry form online. And then the specific goal is to provide 2 resident planned activities per week. So executives are given this information again, and we'll provide it in the community report as well, so you can see which goals you identified earlier. And then what's really cool is we follow that up with another page that shows you how you've progressed or how your communities have progressed on their selected goals. So on this particular chart, you want to see a lot of greens, because that means folks are making positive progress on the goals they've selected. And here we see 1 red. It's community 12. They wanted to improve the attentiveness of dining room servers, and we can see it actually went down 2 points. So we'll want to investigate to see what actually took place there, where this item they selected as a goal actually declined in satisfaction. So we've talked a lot today about how to make improvements and how to identify opportunities to improve in your surveys. But let's talk a little bit about how to capitalize on your strengths. So Zendesk says 90% of consumers use positive reviews to make buying decisions, which means nowadays in our technology-savvy environment, a number of family members are looking online at reviews before they even decide to call the community or tour the community. So why not turn your positive comments from your survey into testimonials? And we find that this is an area that's often overlooked by clients, and we have to point out that this is something that they can be doing. So one area, so how can we do this? And we've actually identified 10 different ideas for making improvements based on your high scoring areas and integrating into your sales and marketing activities so you can flourish. And so 3 of them are listed here. So one way you could integrate your positive comments is during tours. So let's say this couple here asked about dining on the tour. And as you go through your tour, you try to customize what you say and what you show people based on their individual needs and preferences. And this couple here asked about dining. Well, you could say, well, our dining's excellent. Let me show you the dining room. Or you could look at your survey, if this is an area where you scored strongly, and say, customer satisfaction with dining room service is 92%. And by the way, Mrs. Lancaster says she feels like the Queen of England every time she walks into the dining room. I'll introduce you to her after the tour. That has just become so much powerful as a sales tool than just saying dining is excellent. You could also integrate positive comments into your brochures and your other marketing materials. Residents will self-identify on surveys quite often, or in the feedback sessions when you're celebrating strengths. They may raise their hand and say, I gave you a high score in that area, and I made a really nice comment on the survey. In which case, maybe they'd be willing to let you use their name in the brochures. So you could add testimonials to your brochures to make those reviews just front and center for folks who are looking at your community. And finally, your employee recruitment materials. You could put them in your materials and show them at job fairs or even when you're doing interviews, and it helps you attract the best job candidates. So we talked about opportunities and we talked about capitalizing on strengths. What are the key takeaways from today's webinar? Well, first of all, happy customers and employees are good for business. They not only cost less, but they help us bring in new business as well when positive word of mouth spreads that the community is awesome and new move-ins occur and good job candidates come in. Surveys let you hear the true voice of your customers and employees. You might not know how everybody feels, and surveys give them an anonymous outlet for sharing honest feedback with you. Then we talked about 4 ways you could identify opportunities in your survey data. And finally, we shared our plan for how communities can act on those opportunities to make positive change that will hopefully delight and retain their residents and staff, build positive word of mouth, and also result in greater occupancy and more move-ins and lower staff retention. So we want to thank you for your time today, and at this point, we are available to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was really great, Lynn and Mark. A nice presentation on how surveys can help senior living communities. I'd like to field a couple questions. First of all, how often should you conduct surveys?
That's a great question. As you've probably ascertained from our presentation, we care a lot about the improvement process. So for our clients, we typically conduct surveys for them once a year and sometimes twice a year. And that's one approach. And our approach is focused on what you do after the results come in, and that improvement process takes time. So we typically do annual surveys. There's another methodology that allows folks to get real-time feedback from individual customers. That's called the Voice of a Customer program. And that allows you to respond to individual concerns, but it's not the same as responding to the majority all at once, and that's more that what we focus on. So we would say an annual survey or semi-annual.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. The next question is, how do I get the more specific feedback from residents and staff needed for action planning without making them feel uncomfortable?
Oh, that's a really great question, and there is sort of like a hypocrisy here, because on the one hand we're saying provide an anonymous feedback outlet, and then we're saying, well, get together with everyone and ask them about their concerns and ideas for improvement. Well, let me just say that there's a big difference between asking folks to rate how you're doing and telling them, you know what, we plan on making a few improvements. We need your help. We need your feedback to make it happen. And residents and family members and team members are much more willing to share their ideas when you've openly said these are areas I want to work on, versus asking them to rate you on something, which is what they did on the survey. So, and we also have an exercise you can do that even during your feedback sessions, if you feel that folks won't be honest with you, it's an exercise you can do that allows them to continue to provide real feedback that we could share, if anyone wanted to see that exercise as well.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, in your experience, what are the #1 drivers of resident employee satisfaction?
Wow, that's a really good question.
Well, community management is always near the top of the list.
Yes, that's true. On both team member and customer family member surveys, the key drivers are often community management. It's the leadership in the community that sets the stage for most other things that go on in the community. So those often come up as the top drivers. For residents, I would say second would be dining, and then if they're in assisted living, the care or the health care that they're receiving. And for team members, it's by far recognition after community leadership. Sometimes equipment and supplies will come up if they're often short on supplies.
Okay, thank you. Lynn and Mark, thank you again for a really wonderful webinar, very informative, and your visuals were great. That is all the questions we have. I do want to go back to the slide so people can see your offer for the attendees.
Okay. Yes, and so as I mentioned earlier, we've created a free handout called 10 Ways to Enhance Sales and Marketing with Your Survey Results. So we shared 3 of those with you, but this will provide you 10 different ways you can use your positive scores and your positive comments to beef up your sales and marketing efforts.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. And people can get that when they get the follow-up email from us, so that will be perfect. With that being said, everyone have a good afternoon or good later morning, and I appreciate everyone for attending. And again, thank you, Lynn and Mark, for presenting your valuable information on surveys.
Thank you so much, Renee.
Thank you.
You're welcome.